Your breath ghosts in the stairwell. The banister bites your palm, metal gone numb. Outside, lamplight halos wobble in fog. The crunch of frost answers your first step. Coal reek and wet wool smell sit heavy in the throat. In a few minutes, you'll feel, not just here, why winters in Victorian London were savage. Weather in your lungs, not just on the street. Walk with me. Horses snort steam. The clatter on cobbles tells you where ice has skinned the stones. Rooms are colder than lanes, blankets thin chapped hands, learning patience by a fire that isn't there. In this London cold season, the urban chill collects like a tax, paid daily in heat, health, and hope. Until the bone-deep chill starts making the rules. There were ways through it. Shortest distance wasn't always warmest. A route past ovens leaked borrowed heat. Brick remembered sunlight. Under certain lamps, halos felt like a promise. Survival in the smog meant reading small signals and stacking small wins, one doorway of grace at a time, against merciless weather and unforgiving nights. Listen, and the record keeps itself. Henry Mayhew's pages catch a hawker's breath at dawn. Charles Booth's maps show where biting frosts bit hardest. Dickens names the pea soup a London particular, while smoke nuisance debates and the Public Health Acts try to bully the relentless damp into behaving. Names fade, the facts stay warm in your hands. Before we go further, soften your jaw, let your shoulders drop, breathe in for 4, out for 6. Imagine a bakery door leaking heat into the street. You've just built a warm corridor with your mind. That's how people move through bleak midwinter. One cup, one doorway, one shared laugh, threading comfort through brutal cold. Some choices won't make sense until they do. Why crack a window and make a room colder on purpose? Why take the longer path and arrive warmer? Why crowd a brazier when the smoke stings your throat? And how did soot-stained snow, wrong to the eye, still tell time to those who knew how to look? Keep an ear out for the city's quiet cues. A latch clicks, and the wind changes. The tea kettle hiss says 2 minutes until fingers forgive you. A low groan from the river means the Thames is thinking about trouble. In everyday winter hardships, information is heat. Even a chipped mug can rescue toes if you use it right. Now, slow your blink. Let the room turn amber, as if the lamp were wrapped in calm. The relentless damp can wait at the door. We'll move steady and unhurried, and you'll come away knowing how Londoners turned layers into strategy, roots into radiators, and humour into a coal that didn't burn out when nights ran long. If this feels like your kind of night, learning while your body settles, please like and subscribe. In the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. You push open the shutters and the air hits you like an opinion, sharp, damp, and unamused. This is Victorian winter life up close. A bone-deep chill sneaking past scarf and sense, the relentless damp working like a pickpocket at your ribs. London's cold season doesn't arrive with drama. It seeps, it negotiates, it wins. You hear the distant clatter on cobbles as costermongers test their wheels against biting frosts. Lamplight halos hang over the street like tired crowns, and soot-stained snow pretends to be pure until your boots correct it. Somewhere below, the tea kettle hiss says, choose warmth. Now. You notice how the cold edits people. Faces narrow to eyes and steam. Words shorten to nods. And laughter becomes a currency you spend sparingly. In harsh winters of the 19th century, even optimism has mittens. It moves slower, but it still moves. Your first lesson is simple. Humour survives, or you don't. You rub chapped hands and swear the coal reek already knows your middle name. That urban chill isn't just temperature, it's a policy, and the city enforces it with fog. Clothes tell the weather better than any almanac. The wet wool smell is a choir that starts before dawn. Shawls, greatcoats, mufflers, every thread drinking the air and complaining about it. You master the art of layering like a statesman manages committees. Everyone overlaps, and no one agrees, but together they keep you standing. Beneath it all, your skin argues for a fire you haven't earned yet. Survival in the smog means bargaining with the day in tiny increments. You promise to move. It promises not to bite too hard, and both of you lie a little. Windows are negotiators, not barriers. Frost feathers the panes with the arrogance of a painter who isn't taking notes, and you trace a finger road through the pattern like a child choosing a future. Frost feathers the panes. On the other side, the city rehearses the bleak midwinter. Omnibuses coughing, hawkers tuning their voices, chimney pots practicing smoke signals. The soundscape is a curriculum. Hoofbeats, the crunch of frost, a wheel choosing a rut and regretting it. You learn that brutal cold is not a feeling, it's choreography. Keep time or fall behind. Breakfast is a technology. Porridge becomes insulation. Thick tea is an oath you renew with every cup. The tea kettle hiss is your metronome, promising you can outrun merciless weather for exactly 8 sips. You wrap your hands around the mug and feel intelligence return to your fingers like a prodigal son. Everyday winter hardships make philosophers of the practical and poets of the hungry. You choose the former before attempting the latter because poems don't salt sidewalks. Heat has its own marketplace, and you are a customer with opinions. Coal isn't just fuel, it's a mood with fingerprints, and the coal reek climbs your stairwell like gossip nobody asked for. You'll meet coke sellers who swear their lumps burn cleaner, wood hawkers who promise a cheerful blaze, and neighbors who recommend rolled newspapers with the zeal of evangelists. Harsh winters in the 19th century forced you to become a combustion connoisseur. If you misjudge unforgiving nights, will file a complaint with your bones. The street is a risk assessment wrapped in a commute. You step outside, and the lamplight halos look like jellyfish stranded on air, beautiful and vaguely judging. Behind them, the urban chill performs its favorite trick: turn puddles into black glass at exactly the spot you need to cross. You keep one eye on the cartwheels and the other on hats. The hats know wind before you do. Every corner is a lesson in talk. The biting frosts add extra tuition when you forget. Smog is not only seen, it is curated. This isn't a single villain. It's a collaboration between chimneys, fog banks, and ambition. Survival in the smog means you taste the weather before you talk to it. Your breath returns as a ghost and declines to make eye contact. On some mornings, the city is a rumor of itself. Bridges vanish. The river refuses to answer questions, and even the church clocks cough before they strike. You learn to navigate by bakery lines and the memory of last Tuesday. Workshops wake like bears with appointments. A smithy door opens and releases a square of orange argument into the grey. A seamstress taps thimbled fingers to keep blood and hope circulating. You watch the clatter on cobbles rearrange into purpose, as deliveries negotiate truce with ice. Everyday winter hardships are really 1,000 tiny hacks: warming stones under skirts, orange peels over stoves, newspaper under boots like secret armor. None will make you warm. Together they make you brave. You build rituals because ritual is insulation. Pocket warming coins, a whisper of camphor on the scarf, a rule about not thinking grand thoughts until the second cup. In a bitter season, the small repeats save you. Victorian winter, life rewards those who set micro appointments with comfort. Thaw the ink bottle. Turn the letters by the fire. Breathe when the kettle sighs. Even your jokes become mittens, quick, useful, slightly ridiculous, and always paired. Listen to the city argue with the sky. Soot-stained snow tries for innocence and fails. Gutters practice their winter vocabulary. Clog, overflow, repent, repeat. Lamplighters move like punctuation marks through a sentence that refuses to end before supper. You learn to be grateful for punctuation. In merciless weather, pauses keep people human, and the tea kettle hiss returns like a leitmotif, promising that even a temperate climate can have a routine. By afternoon, the damp negotiates a pay raise. Relentless damp doesn't knock. It simply secures tenure in your bones and assigns homework. You fight back with errands that create friction: climb, fetch, stir, sweep, dodge. Movement is your cheapest coal. The urban chill respects motion. The way a cat respects a broom, reluctantly and only while observed. You keep moving because stillness is a petition. The cold loves to grant. And yet, there is a tenderness to the city's winter face. Children fling snow that was honest 2 minutes ago. A stranger steadies another on a treacherous step, and both smile like they invented civility. Biting frosts etch lace on gutters, as if the day is trying to apologize for the morning. You store these moments like hot stones in your pockets. They will carry you into the evening, where the rules of heat and hope are renegotiated by firelight, and by the price of coal you thought you could afford yesterday. You learn fast that fire isn't free. It's a negotiation with a merchant who knows exactly how cold you are. The coalman arrives at dawn, boots chewing slush, shouting weights you can truly verify. His sacks thump the steps like small verdicts, and the coal reek climbs the stairwell before the first shovelful kisses the grate. In Victorian winter life, heat is a currency, and the vendor always seems to hold a better exchange rate than you. You haggle because pride is cheaper than fuel. You pay because unforgiving nights don't haggle back. Coal isn't one thing. It's a caste system you can burn. Foodstuff, Welsh or Warsond, crackles like confidence and leaves less soot-stained snow on your sill. Cheaper slack sulks, smokes and coats the lungs of anyone foolish enough to breathe nearby. You keep a mental ledger of brands, the way modern people rate coffee, except your review includes coughs per hour and how fast the kettle sings. Survival in the smog means picking poison with discernment. Choose wrong, and your parlor becomes a laboratory in urban chill. The grate itself is a tutor with sharp opinions. Too much draft and your shillings fly up the chimney. Too little, and the room becomes a sermon about patience. You learn to pyramid the lumps for quick catch, then flatten for steady heat, then lace with kindling like a tailor stitching warmth into the afternoon. This is London cold season as craft. Bellows, poker, shovel, scuttle, tools you wield like verbs. The tea kettle hiss becomes your scoreboard. When it sputters, you've misread the fire's grammar. Chimney sweeps arrive like punctuation marks, abrupt and necessary. Their brushes rattle the flues, sending down a black snow that argues persuasively for fresh curtains you cannot afford. You tip because you like breathing, and because the sweep song is a small defiance against merciless weather. Clean flues mean brighter lamplight halos and fewer midnight panics about sparks. In harsh winters of the 19th century, safety is the most underrated luxury, right after blankets that don't smell like last week's damp. Fuel hierarchy bleeds into class without asking permission. Townhouses order by the ton and burn like optimism. Single rooms nurse a grudging glow and practice thrift as a martial art. You count lumps the way bankers count coins, rationing evening cheer against morning frost. Everyday winter hardships teach arithmetic. You never ask to learn. So many scuttles to bedtime, so many cups of tea to thaw your fingers, so many jokes required to keep spirits from icing over. The brutal cold audits your budget nightly. Even with a perfect fire, the room never warms evenly. Your shins roast while your spine practices polar exploration, and any door opened by the careless becomes an unpaid invoice to the wind. Draft snakes find the ankle gap with supernatural accuracy, and the wet wool smell of coats hung by the hearth insists on joining supper. You'll invent rituals. The chair drawn just so, the footstool angled like an argument, the screen placed to bully heat toward the part of you doing work. Comfort in the bitter season is geometry. Fuel spills into etiquette. Guests are invited to sit cheek by glow if you're flush. Otherwise, you host standing conversations near the kettle and call it convivial. You apologize for smoke that bites the eyes and joke that the fire is a moody relative you're obliged to keep. There's grace in owning small warmth without pretending it's a sullen blaze. In a city of biting frosts, generosity can be something as humble as moving your chair 2 inches so someone else's knees can believe in April. Outside, cold turns weather into architecture. The sky lowers as if it too is tired of bills, and smog stitches fog to soot until shapes sulk. Street lamps create little theatres of honesty where you can see your breath audition for a role. The clatter on cobbles from the coal cart is a metronome for the neighborhood's hopes, and the crunch of frost under boots feels like a ledger being tallied. The fire you light indoors is your counter-argument to the city's case for gloom. Not all fuel is black and dusty. Wood bundles promise cheerful flames and faster stories, but they vanish like gossip and heat less like a philosophy than a flirtation. Coke burns hot and sullen, the strong silent type that leaves a cleaner conscience in a colder room when you misjudge the air. You experiment because experiments are cheaper than despair. The tea kettle hiss becomes your lab assistant, the window your barometer, your own breath the peer review no editor can ignore. Then there's the moral math of smoke. You know that every comfortable hour paints another layer on the lungs of the city. Yours, your neighbor's, the child who sells matches on the corner. Victorian winter, life teaches a quiet guilt with its comfort. You crack the sash to save your eyes and surrender the heat you just bought with coins that didn't like leaving. This is the relentless damp's favorite joke. Pay twice, breathe once. You learn to forgive yourself in small doses and help where you can. Fuel scarcity writes the day's agenda. If the scuttle is low by mid-afternoon, you accelerate every errand, chase sun across the room like a cat, and park your work in the brightest square of floor. You time letters for the warmest hour, proofread with a shawl over head and shoulders, and declare war on stillness. Motion is a kind of kindling when the budget sulks. Sweep, stir, stretch, brew. The bone-deep chill respects activity, the way a creditor respects prompt payment. Grudgingly, but it does. Here's the part you don't tell the coal man. Fire changes your thoughts. Heat loosens worry into plans. Cold tightens plans into silence. You will overestimate what you can accomplish on a roaring day, and underestimate your courage when the grate goes sullen. That's normal. The trick is to build a mind that can work at warm, and think it cool, to carry a pocket ember of purpose into rooms the city refuses to heat. Later you'll step away from the hearth and into streets where warmth is communal. A soup line, a public house, a crowded omnibus. And you'll feel how 1,000 small fires keep a metropolis from freezing in place. Wear clothes in a Victorian winter. You negotiate a treaty with the brutal cold every morning, and hope the clauses hold till dusk. Start with linen that actually dries, then flannel that forgives, then wool that takes nothing personally. The wet wool smell is a badge you'll earn by breakfast. Don't fight it. Shape it. Shawl over shoulders, muffler at throat. A cap that admits the wind has seniority. The aim isn't elegance. It's survival in the smog with dignity and 10 fingers. Your hands tell on you first. Hands split along invisible maps, so you carry tallow, glycerine, or plain goose grease like a secret handshake with mercy. Fingerless gloves let you count coins and still feel the kettle lid. Mittens happen when the day stops negotiating. In the London cold season you learn the ritual. Rub, wrap, work, repeat. If you forget, the bone-deep chill files a complaint your knuckles will read for a week. Boots are your constitution. Leather wants feeding, blackening, beeswax, a thumb of lanolin when you can afford it, so the streets don't drink your shoes whole. Galoshes keep the worst of the relentless damp from editing your socks into tragedy. You walk by ear. The crunch of frost says steady. The clatter on cobbles warns slick, and the hush under soot-stained snow means choose a different street or fall with grace. A good lace saves an ankle. A bad heel writes a ballad about regret. Layering is less fashion than engineering. Cotton near the skin is a fair-weather friend. In the bitter season it hoards damp like gossip. Flannel breathes, wool argues, and everything you wear must forgive sweat that cools to treachery the moment you stop. You'll master the art of the vent. Unbutton 1, breathe, rebutton 2. Because overheating indoors is just the cold practicing new choreography for when you step back out. Lamplight halos at evening prove whether your day's math worked. Laundry day is a storm with better manners. In harsh winters of the 19th century, water slaps your wrists like a creditor, and steam fogs windows already feathered with frost. Mingling is cardio, rinsing is penance, and drying is a sermon about patience preached over chairs and lines that turn the parlour into an obstacle course. Sheets freeze into argumentative flags if you dare the yard. Indoors, the urban chill and relentless damp conspire to make your ceiling drip melodrama. You cope with windows cracked, fire-fed, and the tea kettle hiss, promising at least your throat understands you. Mending is winter's love language. Turn collars, darn heels, patch elbows. Make today's thread, promise tomorrow it will behave. A visible darn is a kind of honesty. Proof you refuse to be bullied by merciless weather. The second-hand stalls at Rag Fair are universities of thrift. You learn to read fabric by weight and sin, to sniff for coal reek, bake too deep to charm out, to tuck a bargain under your arm like a plan. Every stitch is a small fist raised against unforgiving nights. Umbrellas and macintoshes earn sainthood on sleet days. Rubberized cloth smells like a chemistry lesson, but shrugs off the urban chill with a competence that makes fashion critics mute. Oilskin capes turn a messenger into a sensible argument. For everyone else, a stout shawl pinned tight is half the battle. You'll see the city sort itself by canopy, the rich under silk ribs, the rest under timing and alleys. Both get wet. One just pretends it's a choice. Inside, your wardrobe doubles as architecture. Coats become door snakes. Shawls draft stoppers. Spare blankets drape over the bed like an oath. You reserve one good dress or jacket for rooms with witnesses. The working set does the real negotiation with soot, splash, and the occasional coal pop. Hanging wet garments by the hearth, perfume supper with wet wool smell and a hint of triumph. It's not appetizing. It's honest. And honesty keeps bellies warm longer than pretense. Children are their own weather systems. You tie scarves twice because they invent games that shear not integrity. You stuff hot bricks and newspaper into little boots like contraband comfort. Mittens on strings keep the street from stealing one glove at a time. Biting frosts teach patience to fidgets and humility to parents. Everyone wins when the tea kettle hiss calls a truce. At night you stack tiny socks by the grate like prayers. Fashion doesn't vanish, it adapts. A bowler sits lower against the wind. A bonnet grows an extra veil. Even the peacock learns to preen under coal reek without inviting a cough. Respectability rides on how well you manage weather, not how loudly you deny it. In the bleak midwinter, the bravest statement piece is a scarf you lend. That sort of elegance earns nods from strangers and a seat nearer the fire. Footing remains a moral tale. Pattens and overshoes lift you out of mud that pretends to be water. A walking stick tests the street's alibis before your ankle does. You'll learn the safe path by the parade of cautious footprints and the absence of heroic splats. When lamplight halos blur into one long smear, hold a wall like an old friend and let the city guide you by memory. Pride is expensive ice. And yes, there are days when even the best layers lose the argument. That's when you borrow heat, public houses, omnibus breath, a spot by the baker's door while a tray cools. Community is a winter garment you can't hang in a wardrobe. You'll feel it later tonight in rooms where warmth becomes ritual, supper, stories, someone's song half remembered. But first, we need to step into the workday itself and see how factories, offices, and street trades keep moving when the weather refuses to. The clock grumbles 8, and you're already on the move, breath turning into small ghosts that refuse to pay rent. The street is a percussion section. Clatter on cobbles, crunch of frost, horses negotiating steel shoes with treachery. Victorian winter, life does not pause for sentiment. It audits your courage before you finish the second button. Lamplight. Halos fade into a grey that feels personal, and the urban chill promotes itself from nuisance to manager. You tuck your chin, square your shoulders, and agree to the day's terms. You'll keep moving, and it will keep pretending that's enough. Factories wake like furnaces with arguments to settle. Inside the foundry, the heat hits you sideways, but it's a conditional mercy, scalding front, cold spine, sweat that turns to ice the moment you step 6 paces from the pour. Harsh winters of the 19th century taught machines to sing over the wind. Belts slap, wheels whine, and somewhere a foreman's whistle declares time a religion. Chapped hands try for precision with numb fingertips. A rivet missed is a story told poorly, and then retold by the foreman at volume. You learn to read warmth as weather, and keep your distance from both. Style rooms are their own climate. Steam heavy as an oath, windows crying on the inside, and wet wool smell composing a ballad no one asked for. You work the shuttle with a rhythm that keeps your teeth from chattering, counting by touch when sight fails to the fog. Breaks happen near the boiler, where the air is thick with other people's hope, and you sip tea that tastes faintly of iron and relief. Everyday winter hardships are honest here. No one pretends this is comfortable. They only pretend it is normal, which is close enough to survive. Downriver, the docks explain what brutal cold really means. Ropes go stiff like stubborn sentences, planks glass over. The Thames breathes fog that smells of faraway weather and near-at-hand risk. You stamp your feet in straw, coax feeling back into toes that have been reading ice all morning, and shoulder sacks that bite harder when the wind gets ideas. A misstep is not drama, but physics, and the water's argument is final. You work anyway, because London's cold season pays by the ton, not the temperature. Street trades invent warmth as a product. The muffin man's bell is a promise. The chestnut brazier a small parliament of embers where fingers vote to live. You hear survival in the smog as a chorus. Hot pies, hot eels, steaming coffee. The cries cut through the bone-deep chill better than sermons. Coal reek marinates everything, but sweetness sneaks past. Nutmeg from a pudding cart, orange peel from a sailor with luck. Biting frosts make philosophers of vendors. They price compassion by the halfpenny, and add 1 extra chestnut when your cough tells its own story. Clerks practice Arctic bureaucracy. Ink sulks into slush. Pen nibs snap like brittle opinions. Ledgers absorb the cold and return it with interest. You resurrect the day with a contraband teapot under the desk. The tea kettle hiss small as a conspiracy. And fingerless gloves that turn arithmetic into a tolerable hobby. Lamplight halos inside the office are yellow disclaimers. We tried. You breathe on your hands, re-ink the stamp, and learn that a tidy column can warm a mind even when it can't warm a room. Drivers and conductors negotiate with weather on behalf of the impatient. Omnibuses chew through soot-stained snow, rains squeak, harness steam hangs like tired flags. The crunch of frost under iron rim is a metronome that doesn't care about schedules, but the city does, and so do you. All get spread in intersections where accidents breed. A boy runs ahead to sand the treacherous stretch, earning a nod and a copper. Merciless weather is an unpaid co-worker. Loud, unhelpful, and impossible to fire. The youngest shoulders, the newsboy, the errand girl, learn winter's grammar early. Boots leak. Pages dampen. The wet wool smell clings like a lesson you don't forget. You become a logistics prodigy by necessity. Short routes through sheltered courts, a baker's doorway used as a warming station. The timing of when the tea shops empty their slops bucket so you don't discover it the sad way. There's humour too, dry as yesterday's bread. You trade jokes like hand warmers and borrow courage by the sip. Everyone carries a pharmacy of folk science. A paper twist of mustard for a chest plaster. A ginger lozenge that burns you back into the present. A dram of something honest in a cup that pretends it's only tea. Priests of practicality preach cod liver oil. The pews are full. Soup kitchens bloom like lanterns in the bleak midwinter, ladling heat into people and giving the air a reason to smell like mercy for 5 streets. Survival is social. Your body warms faster in a queue than on a sofa you can't afford to heat. Workplaces hack the season with choreography. Rotations put the coldest jobs near the warmest pipe at predictable intervals. One kettle does rounds as faithfully as a beadle. Doors get braced half open so the draft behaves rather than improvises. The foreman who would never say, please says, "Tear." Because management learns kindness when the thermometer misbehaves. Community becomes a blanket you can actually feel. Hands around mugs, stories around the brazier, laughter thick enough to bend the ear toward humane. Risk multiplies when warmth gets desperate. Extra braziers flirt with sparks, chimneys sulk, windows crack under the argument between inside and out. You practice ventilation like a moral. Clear the flue, clear the mind, clear the floor of trip hazards before the dusk light goes treacherous. Insurance assessors develop the eyes of saints and the patience of cats. Everybody listens when they list what burns. In harsh winters of the 19th century, safety is not a lecture, it's a habit worn smooth. By late afternoon, the city starts counting receipts and ribs. You feel wages as heat before you hold them, already converting coins into coal, bread, and one merciful extra candle. Lamplighters lace the streets with halos again, and the clatter on cobbles changes key from urgency to exhausted dignity. The bone-deep chill has had its say. Now it's your turn. You'll carry the day's ache toward rooms where warmth is a choice you can make, if the scuttle isn't empty, and toward tables where supper and stories renegotiate what the night owes you. You feel the city exhale as the day clocks out. Hooves slacken, shop blinds clack, and lamplight halos bloom like small, stubborn suns against a sky the color of yesterday's tea. The clatter on cobbles turns from commerce to caution. You tighten your scarf, check pocket and pace, and follow the warm breadcrumb trail of bakery air home. Victorian winter life always saves a little grace for the walk back. Just enough to keep the bone-deep chill from naming you. The front door is a threshold and a test. Cold pours in low like a cat. You shoulder it shut and set the latch as if manners apply to weather. Wet wool smell announces your arrival before you do, and the coal reek sulks from the grate like a relative with opinions. You hang coats to drip into the pan, strike the tinder, and hear the tea kettle hiss volunteer for duty. In London's cold season, hospitality begins with flame and ends with steam. Supper is logistics disguised as comfort. You build heat from the plate outward. Potato, onion, barley, foods that exhale patience and make merciless weather taste negotiable. A heel of bread revived over the fire becomes philosophy. A dab of dripping persuades children that hope is edible. Everyday winter hardships shrink when mouths are busy. You learn to season with story and serve seconds of silence, the kind that lets bodies remember they're safe. Kitchens are classrooms of warmth. Bread sets to rise near the oven. Mugs ring the stove like parishioners, and the kettle keeps time for everything. A metronome that also sings. You stage the room so heat learns manners. Screen to nudge the glow toward the table. Brick to bully drafts at the door. A trivet army to keep supper from arguing with ashes. The result isn't luxury. It's dignity that happens to be hot. Elders and infants get first claim. Grandmother's chair earns the cheek by glow seat by right and story count. The baby's cradle wears a shawl like a crown. You warm a brick in the coals, wrap it in paper and flannel, and slide it under blankets with reverence. The biting frosts respect that ritual, the way creditors respect receipts. This is how families bully a bitter season into behaving. Triage, tenderness, repetition. Laundry intrudes even at night. Shirts steam on the rack like small arguments you've decided to win. Stockings circle the fender in a choreography that would scandalize a drawing room and save a foot. The relentless damp hates the order you impose, so you double down, window cracked to finger's width, fire fed in small honest portions, chairbacks deputized into drying horses. Heat is a project. You show up like you mean it. Entertainment is warmth by other means. A penny dreadful read aloud knits the room tighter. A hymn hummed softly convinces drafts to take the long way round. Cards scrape like friendly mice. A concertina finds the one cheerful key the day forgot. In the bleak midwinter, joy doesn't shout. It leans. Even the cat contributes, choosing a lap with the accuracy of a seasoned quartermaster. Etiquette bends to weather and becomes kindness. You offer the warm seat to a guest without announcing the sacrifice. You pour tea before opinions. You pass the spoon so the soup stays a democracy. Lamplight halos indoors make faces readable again, and conversation loosens the way boots do when you're finally home. If you have 2 coppers worth of extra cheer, you spend it here where returns are immediate and interest is paid in sleep. Danger still prowls the margins of comfort. Chimneys forget their manners. Sparks flirt with curtains, and flues sulk when fed the wrong kind of coal. You practice ventilation like a prayer. Damper, sash, glance, listen. The room answers honestly, stinging eyes, restless flame, and you adapt. Safety is a winter virtue measured in habits, not heroics. And the tea kettle hiss is your favorite fire alarm because it nags without scaring the children. Bedtime is strategy, not surrender. You rake the fire to a red geography and set the guard of ash. You slip the warming pan between sheets so cold won't introduce itself rudely. Layers become architecture. Blanket, rug, shawl, one last joke to pin the night in place. Chapped hands get tallow, feet get wool, and the window earns a second curtain because tomorrow deserves a head start. Sometimes the night insists on errands. Medicine for a neighbor, a father late from shift, a midwife's knock that brooks no debate. You pack heat you can carry. Hot brick, flask, faith in the root. Outside, the urban chill has repainted the street in treacherous gloss, but kindness leaves tracks. Soup kitchens glow like low constellations. The watch tips a hat, a doorway offers shelter long enough to count fingers and decisions. Community is a blanket with 1,000 hands. Then there's the ritual of gratitude that happens after the latch slides and the house learns quiet. You look around the room, coals banked, bowls stacked, faces softening towards sleep, and you understand why winter never quite wins here. Victorian winter life is a practice, not a season. Repeat the warmth, repeat the care, repeat the small defiance that turns unforgiving nights into survivable ones. Tomorrow will ask new questions. Tonight you've answered enough. Illness in a Victorian winter doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It sneaks in through the keyhole and sits on your chest like unpaid rent. The urban chill makes throats roar, and the relentless damp teaches lungs to wheeze in new dialects. You hear it in stairwells, those thin symphonies of coughs echoing between bricks, and in the way lamplight halos catch breath like fog in miniature. This is everyday winter hardship with manners. Polite, persistent, absolutely exhausting. You don't panic, you plan. Panic wastes heat. First, you read the body like a weather report. A rasp in the morning? Likely the coal reek negotiating with your bronchial tubes. A fever by dusk? That's the London cold season charging interest. You feel for the child's pulse with fingers that remember last year's scare, and you keep a kettle marching because the tea kettle hiss is the gentlest physician you can afford on a Tuesday. In harsh winters of the 19th century, vigilance was the only luxury that didn't cost extra. Chemists become winter's chaplains. Step into the shop and the air changes. Menthol, camphor, the licorice tang of pastilles promising truce. Bottles chant labels like homilies, cough tincture, linseed lozenges, friar's balsam. You don't buy miracles, you buy margins. A spoon of something bitter buys an hour of peace, so sleep can do its slow carpentry. Survival in the smog is often an economy of minutes strung together like beads. Kitchen cures are older than the ledger, and twice as loyal. Mustard plasters that make you swear, onion syrup that tells the truth your tongue doesn't enjoy. Hot bricks wrapped like contraband warmth for aching feet. You brew thyme and lemon because it smells like a plan. You rub a chest with goose grease because grandmother won't take no for an answer. The brutal cold loves to call these superstitions. You call them Tuesday, and Tuesday calls them working. Doctors arrive with watch chains and a vocabulary that charges by the syllable. They listen, tap, squint, and prescribe bed rest in rooms that barely qualify as warm. If you're lucky, a charitable dispensary prints advice in plain type and tincture in smaller bills. If not, you do arithmetic. Coal versus consultation, broth versus powders, hope versus rent. Unforgiving night's forced choices that good weather politely hides. Contagion maps onto class like frost onto windows, thicker where insulation is a rumor. 10 to a room means 10 coughs become one chorus, and the wet wool smell of drying laundry takes on a medical accent. You crack a sash for honesty, bank the fire for mercy, and assign the healthiest aunt to ladle broth like liturgy. Victorian winter life is communal whether you plan it or not. You may as well let kindness be the loudest part. Work doesn't wait for wellness. The dockhand wraps a scarf over a chest that sounds like gravel. The seamstress adds another shawl and stitches through shivers. The clerk warms ink with a candle that scalds his eyes. Biting frosts don't accept sick notes. So you invent intervals. 5 minutes by the boiler, 10 near the brazier, a swallow of hot tea whenever the whistle permits. Healing by inches is still healing, and inches accumulate. Night is both enemy and pharmacopoeia. You boil the air on purpose. Basin near the coals, damp towel on the chair back, a poultice that smells like hope and onions. And tell stories gentle enough to lower pulses. Lamplight halos blur faces into something kinder, and the room hears breathing turn from argument to truce. You sleep like a guard, waking to count the coughs and learn how many sips it takes to send a child back under. Grief is on the street, but so is grit. A funeral bell can ring twice in one block, and still you'll see neighbors swap shifts at a sickbed like seasoned generals. Soup kitchens stir pots that steam the air with solidarity. Parish visitors bring paper promises and real blankets. Against merciless weather, the most efficient medicine is often proximity. Warmth from other bodies, courage traded in whispers, a hand steadying another on stairs glossy with frost. There are scams, of course. Miracle cough cures that taste like regret and brandy. Pamphlets preaching cold baths at dawn to lungs already bargaining with midnight. You get wise fast. Rule of thumb. If the label shouts louder than a mother, leave it. Quiet remedies tend to work better. Steam, rest when the world allows. Broth seasoned with stubbornness. Small fires tended often. Prevention becomes a winter sport. Sweep ash like it owes you money. And post rules that read like psalms. Boots off. Hands washed, shawls on, no drafts at supper. A drop of eucalyptus on the pillow tricks the brain into optimism. Fresh air at noon tells the house it doesn't own you. You won't dodge every cough. You will dodge some. And in February, that's the kind of victory you can frame. When the fever breaks, the city returns like color after grayscale. Bread smells louder. The crunch of frost underfoot sounds less like a sentence and more like punctuation, and coal smoke retreats from accusation to background. You count the spoons again, and all of them are present. Tomorrow's chores are already knocking, but for tonight you've won a small, stubborn battle. Hold that warmth. You'll need it when we step into the alleys of help and law, charity, poor relief, and the winter rules written in ledgers and in hearts. You find out quickly that kindness in a Victorian winter is both heartfelt and bureaucratic. The parish clerk keeps a quill like a thermometer, measuring need in careful strokes, while the urban chill drafts its own petitions at every door. A knock can be a prayer or an audit. Inside the vestry, breath fogs the panes and the tea kettle, hiss does its best impression of sympathy, while ledgers tally bread, coal, and beds. Mercy has a form to fill out. Warmth has a waiting list. The churchyard queue builds before daylight, a thin river of wet wool smell and cautious hope. Mothers clutch children. Old men cup hands around nothing, and imagine heat into being. Lamplight halos blur faces into one silhouette of patience. You and the choreography. Names, addresses. The winter story told briefly, so the clerk can keep writing. In the bleak midwinter, dignity is a steady voice and a hat that doesn't shake when the door opens. Parish relief is arithmetic with a conscience. A loaf here, a coal ticket there, perhaps rent for a week when the landlord's temper grows teeth. The system wants to be fair. The weather insists on being hungry. You advocate in complete sentences, dates, illnesses, wages, because the brutal cold respects detail. When the stamp thumps and the ticket tears, the paper feels warmer than it should. It's not salvation, it's gasoline for the afternoon. Soup kitchens glow like small embassies of sanity. The cauldrons purr, ladles vote for survival, and steam writes temporary amnesty on every window. Broth first, opinions later, the matron says, and the room agrees. Everyday winter hardships melt a bit when the bowl touches palm. Even the coal reek blurs into background against pepper and onion. You eat discipline with your dinner. Sit, share. Leave the place better than you found it. Mercy runs on manners as much as on meat. Workhouses are a different grammar, nouns of iron, verbs of regulation. You step in, and the air is scrubbed into obedience. Hunger becomes task. Cold becomes uniform. Beds line up like punctuation marks, and the day moves by bell, not by weather. For some, this order is rescue. For others, it's a sermon they can't say amen to. You respect the honesty. The building never promises comfort, only survival in the smog on institutional terms. Charitable societies stitch themselves into the city like extra seams. Ladies' committees knit blankets and visit sick rooms where biting frosts have been conducting their own campaign. Men's clubs fund coal clubs so shillings can turn into scuttles at bulk rates. You watch London's cold season invent partnerships faster than the thermometer can fall. Good intentions sometimes collide with pride, but most nights they choose cooperation over grammar. Street missions meet people where the weather is rudest. A handbell rings, a kettle arrives, and someone who knows names says them aloud until faces remember their scene. Tracks ride along with tea. Hymns share space with the clatter on cobbles. You may not buy the sermon every time, but you'll take the cup and you'll help hold the windbreak over a stranger's shoulders. Faith, here, is less a doctrine than a blanket held steady. All law guardians argue, like accountants who love human beings. Relief in aid or relief in kind? Outdoor or indoor? Fraud or famine? Meanwhile, the bone-deep chill does not attend meetings. It makes its case directly to ribs and joints. You learn to translate policy into the only question that matters at dusk. Will this keep a child warm tonight? If the answer is somewhat, you call it a victory and push for more tomorrow. There's a grey economy of mercy that slides between the ledgers. The baker saves yesterday's loaves for the late bell. The coalman miscounts upward on the coldest Fridays. The landlady grants 1 week's credit on the condition that you promise to break her heart by paying it back. Lamplight halos outside these doors look a little brighter, and soot-stained snow seems to step aside when these people walk. Call it charity, call it neighbor sense. It keeps streets from cracking. You learn the etiquette of accepting help without losing your spine. Take a ticket, thank the hand, repay in any currency available. A shoveled stoop, a fetched pail, a watchful eye when the alley gets ideas. Winter teaches reciprocity with a stern but not unkind voice. Today's soup line becomes tomorrow's rescue squad, when the Thames sends up a fog with teeth. The same faces appear, this time holding ropes. Children map the system faster than adults. They know which door yields the extra ladle, which matron pretends not to see a second pair of hands under one shawl, which charity schools let you warm your feet by the iron while you recite psalms. In a bitter season, cunning is a form of innocence. You let them lead because they always choose the shortest route between shiver and steam. And in the late hours, when unforgiving nights press their case hardest, you watch the city's 2 winters, official and improvised, braid together. Parish tickets become coal in actual grates. Soup kitchens empty into warm rooms where stories finish thawing. Workhouse lights burn for those with nowhere else to belong. And the last kettle sings for a neighbor who finally slept. Tomorrow the ledger will open again, and so will the doors. For now, pocket the small proof that mercy can be managed and still feel like love. You don't go out on a Victorian winter night for decadence. You go because laughter is cheaper than coal. The music hall marquee glows like a dare, lamplight halos trembling in the urban chill, as if even light has the shivers. Inside, breath becomes weather. Clouds rising to the ceiling while the pit orchestra tunes Courage in C major. Coats steam, gloves gossip in pockets, and the wet wool smell politely steps aside for beer and oranges. Victorian winter life has a rule. If the room is warm, someone paid with jokes. Seats become triage. You aim for the middle, close enough to feel the footlights, far enough to avoid a draft that knows your name. Comic works blue by Victorian standards, which means puns, eyebrow acrobatics, and a song about a hat. And the crowd answers with a gratitude that sounds like hunger finally fed. Everyday winter hardships thaw 2 inches at a time. First the ears, then the jaw, then the muscles that forgot how to unclench. Fighting frosts wait outside like debt collectors. The band plays louder. You learn the economy of applause. Clap too hard, and your chapped hands remind you the bill arrives later. Clap too soft, and the encore stays in its coat. Prima Donna sells July by the verse, and the pit trades coins for temporary summers. Coal reek lingers in the rafters, but loses the argument to spilt porter and the citrus halo from a tray of quartered oranges. London cold season yields to theatrical weather, warmer, louder, mercifully fake. Between acts, the foyer conducts a ballet of breath and pocket. A hawker promises hot pies from a tray that smokes like hope. A boy does brisk trade in paper twists of sugared almonds. Couples invent geography in corners where the wind can't conjugate. You eavesdrop on plans to walk home in gangs, to split a cab 3 ways, to loiter until the worst of the brutal cold changes shifts. Survival in the smog is a team sport, scored in degrees. The playhouse across the square sells a different warmth, longer, quieter, more expensive in patience. Tragedy glows blue, even in lamplight halos, and you feel tears stall halfway down cheeks as they meet the room's chill. When the heroine coughs, the stage kind, that means plot, not doctor, the audience coughs back in solidarity and irony. Theatres teach you a winter trick: hold emotion like a hot brick, close enough to use, far enough not to burn. Music halls are louder and more honest. A comic stomps rhythm into the boards, while the chorus line becomes a calendar no frost owns. The crowd keeps time with boot heels and borrowed optimism. For an hour, the bleak midwinter is a rumour that can't afford a ticket. You will pay for this later, returning to soot-stained snow and a wind that knows shortcuts. But now you purchase heat in verses and tip in laughter. Public houses are parliament for the cold. Doors push back, voices push forward, and the clatter on cobbles becomes a muffled drum once you're inside. Tankards ring like local bells. Dominoes slap cents into the table. Someone sings about a ship that never existed, but absolutely arrives by chorus 3. Everyday winter hardships get audited by the landlord. Stir that fire. Mind the flu. Give Mrs. H her corner, and the ledger balances in stew and ale. Etiquette bends toward survival. You trade seats by the hearth, with a man whose ears have gone the colour of blackberries. You lend a scarf to a girl whose laugh earns her 4 inches nearer the grate. You learn that the most fashionable posture is whichever one blocks a draught. In merciless weather, generosity has a stool and a say. The room knows it. Even the dog relocates to make space for boots that can't feel their toes. Entertainment carries risk like a secret. Too many bodies, too little air. One careless spark. The headlines write themselves. So the landlord polices lamps with the zeal of a bishop. A pot of sand sits like a sermon by the fender, and windows crack a finger's width even when every soul hisses in protest. Safety is the house band. You miss it only when it stops playing. The best evenings end with cheeks warm, not alarms loud. Cabmen outside stack time into fares. Whips whisper against horse manes as drivers judge the street's honesty. The slick on the stones, the temperament of the wind, the far door that never quite latches. You barter in warmth, 1 shilling to avoid the bone-deep chill, 2 if the alley you fear most looks ambitious. The city accepts cash, courage, or company. Wise people pay with all 3. When the night runs thin, even the merriest rooms admit the bill. The last song softens. The publican draws the line, and cold leans in with the entitlement of a landlord at quarter day. You wrap up like a sentence ending in full stop, promise to return, and step into a street repainted in gloss and grit. Lamplight halos seem smaller now, but they still mark a path. Follow them, and you'll find the kettle and bed you earned with applause. And as you walk, you notice the quiet heroics. A link boy guiding a grandmother to her door. A constable steadying a drunk without fuss. A pie seller handing the last hot one to a lad who can pay but shivers convincingly. This is nightlife that keeps people alive, not legends that get them in trouble. Keep that in your pocket for the next stretch, when we slip into the tenement stair and see how sleep is negotiated, by blankets, bodies, and the stubborn idea that morning is worth reaching. The stairway tells the truth before any landlord does. It smells of wet wool, cabbage, and the coal reek that climbs faster than you can. And each step holds a small history of boots that came home late, because warmth was cheaper by the song. You thread upward under lamplight halos the size of saucers, fingers skimming a banister polished by need. This is Victorian winter life at bedtime. No velvet, just stubbornness. Behind thin doors, kettles mutter like kindly aunts, and the relentless damp re-inspects every wall. You arrive at your landing already negotiating with the night. Rooms are smaller after dark. The London cold season leans in from the window and shrinks the floor plan. The bed expands to become furniture, fireplace, and family diplomacy. And it's a biography, patched from 3 addresses, edged by a neighbour who owed you thanks, heavy with the wet wool smell that never quite agrees to leave. You stack coats like shingles and slide a warmed brick to the foot, a contraband sun wrapped in yesterday's news. Sleep isn't granted, it's assembled. Hot bedding is the city's midnight economy. One man's day shift becomes another woman's pillow, and the mattress learns more schedules than secrets. If you're lucky, fresh sheets. If not, you bargain with the bone-deep chill and pretend straw can forget. Children sleep sideways like punctuation marks between clauses who love them. You pull the curtain, a thin suggestion of privacy that chatters in any draft, and decide to dream of August only after the kettle signs off with a last soft hiss. Every bed has its meteorology. Breath fogs into small weather systems that condense on panes, feathered with frost, then drip like slow clocks onto the sill. You crack the sash a finger's width because air that doesn't move becomes an accusation. The window replies with a lash of brutal cold that teaches humility. Somewhere, a cough performs its thin opera, answered by a spoon against a mug and a whispered hush that is equal parts love and strategy. In unforgiving nights, lullabies are logistics with a tune. Noise sorts itself by duty. Carts retreat, boots soften, and the clatter on cobbles becomes a distant metronome for sleep. Inside, you learn the building's arguments, floorboard debates, a pipe with opinions, the muffled diplomacy of couples dividing blankets by inches. The infant in number 3 calls committee. The old man on the top floor answers with a kettle that knows exactly when to sing. If there's a fight, it's brief. Merciless weather moderates better than any magistrate. Heat sharing is a craft. You angle the bed so the grate's glow licks shins first. You build a fire that burns steady rather than proud. Cole's bad temper tries to smoke. You bribe it with kindling and a door cracked to teach the draft manners. The tea kettle hiss becomes your safety officer. Cheerful, nosy, impossible to ignore. On the worst nights you boil the air. Pans near coals, damp cloths on chairs, lungs negotiating truce with steam. And fancy, just 10 small rights against 1,000 small wrongs. Etiquette bends toward survival, even at midnight. You knock softly when fetching a midwife. You move like punctuation in a house that needs quiet grammar, and you return borrowed bed warmers with thanks that sound like prayer. The stair is a commons. You share it like bread. A neighbour slips you 2 sticks of kindling. You leave half a loaf at her door when you can. In the bleak midwinter, respectability is not lace. It's courtesy to people who are also trying to sleep. Pests and draughts are the twin petty tyrants. Bedbugs print their tiny signatures on arms that can't afford revolutions. You counter with scalding water and a sermon of soap. Draft snakes hunt ankles. You recruit rags, shawls, and the sacrificial Sunday paper to plug the cunning leak that always lives under the door. You learn the building's secret map of warm spots and cold lies. The corner by the chimney is a chapel. The strip beneath the window is Siberia. Danger keeps odd hours. Braziers make bad promises, flues sulk, gas lamps flirt with headlines. You practice the liturgy of safety even in yawns. Damper window, water by the hearth, coal scuttle out of toddler range, matches where tired hands can still be wise. The children call it fussy, you call it February. When wind fingers the sashes and the building answers with a groan, you count heartbeats until the timbers decide they weren't serious. Dreams in these rooms, no economics. People dream of stoves that don't smoke, boots that don't leak, and soup that picks its own ingredients. Even humor dreams small. A joke about the landlord's hat that warms more than it deserves. A fantasy of waking to a son that owes you money. You let the mind drift towards stories that loosen the jaw and relax the shoulders, because that's how morning wins, that and potatoes. The city cannot tax your imagination, but it will try to rent it. Night errands stitch the block together. A runner goes for the chemist. A lad carries a note to a father on late shift. An aunt with elbows escorts a girl up from the yard where the ice is practicing crimes. On these short voyages, you meet the municipal saints, the constable who lends his lantern, the link boy who knows where frost lies about its depth, the watchman who taps the curb like a metronome for courage. Survival in the smog is communal even when the hour isn't. And then, mercy, the house changes key. The kettle wakes first, that faithful little engine. Next, the child who measures the window with a fingertip and declares the frost pretty, as if it didn't argue with toes all night. You rake the coals, listen for mice pretending they had plans, and feel the room expand back to its daylight size. Victorian winter life renews its contract with you one morning at a time. Breakfast is the signature, and the day, however bitter, will honor it as long as you do. The river is a mood with a tide table. In the London cold season it wears fog, like a borrowed coat, shoulders hunched, breath showing even at noon. You hear it before you see it. Bells on unseen boats, oars knocking a rhythm against wood, a gull laughing at your optimism. The embankment stones sweat. Iron railings bite your glove. The bone-deep chill coming off the water feels older than the city. Victorian winter life keeps one eye on the Thames because water remembers storms, debts, names. Crossings are negotiations, not errands. Bridges collect humanity into slow, steaming knots. Hawkers hugging the lee side, clerks counting steps to keep warm. Costers pushing barrows that squeal like cold hinges. Biting frosts glaze the steps where river stairs meet the tide. You place your feet like a lawyer, picking words. Ferries work when they can, shrug when they can't, and the boatmen's faces are maps of the weather's opinions. Every landing smells of coal reek, rope, and a rumor that someone tried the shortcut and didn't finish it. Fog turns the river into an unlit hallway. Watermen shout names into wool, and sound travels sideways. You answer with a coin held like a flare. Whistles code distance, too short for close, one long for. You'll regret that choice. Lamps make small lamplight halos that smear the air rather than solve it, and the tide slaps the stones with a patience that doesn't care about your appointment. Survival in the smog means trusting ears first, then elbows, then God. Accidents don't look like theatre. They look like bad math. A heel slips, a sack shifts, a hand misses a rail polished by 1,000 cold mornings. Drags and ropes live coiled by the stairs, watched by men who pretend they aren't waiting to become heroes. When the river takes someone, the crowd becomes a machine. Shout, throw, pull, breathe, pray, while a nearby Tian hisses like a sympathetic aunt. Everyday winter hardships include this: standing still in brutal cold, so you can be the warmth that tries to pull a stranger back. Engineers tried to tame the bank and managed to civilize it. The Victorian embankments confine the river's temper, thread sewers where smell used to own the script, and carve a promenade that allows you to pretend the Thames is a view rather than a fact. On good afternoons you can walk above the water like a reasonable person, but the merciless weather still edits the scene, wind magnified under bridges, frost collecting where the sun forgets to visit. The stone remembers every thaw like a confession. Ice is a liar here. Shallows will wear a thin skin that looks persuasive to children and fools, and constables learn new ways to say no without breaking anyone's pride. Elders tell stories of frost fairs farther back. Ale on ice, ox roasted where the river pretended to be a street. But your century mostly inherits the tales minus the physics. The Thames cracks jokes with a wet punchline. You keep to the steps and pretend you never heard them. Commerce keeps breathing because the city must. Coal-lighters nudge along with ropes frozen into arguments. Barge hands hammer ice off cleats and swear loyalty to tea. A cask is a treacherous friend in cold. It rolls better than it stops, and the crunch of frost on planks becomes a warning you feel in your ankles. The docks taste of salt, smoke, and tin mugs. Men spread straw where boots need a second chance. London's cold season is an audit. The river examines courage and balance sheets alike. Navigation becomes music when sight resigns. Boatmen whistle scales that mean port and starboard, ring a bell at the bend, drag a pole to read depth by vibration through the wrist. You learn to stand still and count. 1, 2, 3. Then the answering clang tells you a hull exists just beyond your patience. In this choir of metal and breath, survival feels like a duet with strangers. The river conducts, indifferent and exact. Bridges have microclimates and manners. Under arches collect dripping teeth of ice that drop at their leisure. Wind concentrates into mischief where the span narrows and your hat rethinks its loyalties. Beggars cultivate the warmest stones. Chestnut sellers occupy upwind corners that make their smoke look like kindness. Pickpockets prefer the lee side where hands linger near pockets for warmth. You learn to carry your purse like a promise and your compassion like a coin already half spent. Thaw is not simply relief, it's paperwork. Sudden melts send slush and anger at sellers, and shopkeepers build sandbag fortresses with the speed of sleepless experts. Gutters discover ambitions and try to relocate indoors. The city replies with mops, curses, and a bucket brigade that would impress Caesar. Wet wool smell colonizes neighborhoods that yesterday only flirted with damp. The bleak midwinter has a way of doubling back to check if you've learned anything. Night changes the river's voice. Lamps stripe the black like stitched gold, and police boats move with the patience of men who have seen endings and prefer detours. You pass a spot where flowers sometimes rest for people whose names the water kept. You take off your hat because grief deserves warmth too. Unforgiving nights ask hard questions softly along the Thames, and the answers are hands on rails, eyes on friends, and a pace that doesn't dare the dark. Dawn forgives what it can. Market boats quiver into view with cabbages that smell like decisions. Oranges, bright as advice, roll against the thwarts. A gull argues with a bargee about nothing important, which is how you know the day wants to be ordinary again. The tea kettle hiss in a riverside watchhouse tells you people made it through to morning. You pull your scarf tighter, count your pockets by touch, and head towards streets that will test your footing in new ways, alleys, markets, and the slippery arithmetic of earning heat 1 hour at a time. Markets open before the sky makes up its mind. Stalls bloom out of crates, canvas snaps like a pinion, and the clatter on cobbles becomes a drumline for hope. You move through Victorian winter life as if wielding a ladle, scooping warmth where it overflows, pouring it into the hour that leaks the most. Coal reek drifts past oranges stacked like tiny suns. Fish sing their cold, bright song over ice that thinks too highly of itself. The urban chill tests your wrists first. You answer with coins and momentum. Costas are meteorologists with barrows. They read wind by hat, brim, frost by wheel, squeal, custom by the way fingers fumble for purse strings. Everyday winter hardships turn them into comedians at speed. Hot spuds for cold knuckles, kippers warmer than your landlord. You buy not just food, but sentences that thaw you one grin at a time. In harsh winters of the 19th century, patter is central heating with jokes. Breadlines are liturgies of steam. Ovens exhale absolution, and the crunch of frost outside becomes mere punctuation against the interior grammar of crust and crumb. You time your place so the loaf lands in your hands, audibly alive. Chapped hands remember manners. Elbows negotiate kindly. A child is lifted, a shawl adjusted, a penny added by a stranger who dropped it. This is survival in the smog at its politest. Warmth by cue. Breakfast on the street is a syllabus. Chestnuts vote for fingers. Eels in peppered liquor insist on being better than they sound. A coffee stall hisses like a sympathetic aunt. Tea kettle. Hiss answers from a dozen corners, each promising you'll get through the bitter season if you keep sipping and moving. Wet wool smell mingles with nutmeg and courage. You eat standing because the stool is for someone older. Hawkers sell time as much as goods. Matches for the day's shadows, wicks for the hours that will forget you, newspapers to wrap tomorrow's boots. Lamplight halos fade, replaced by breath. Halos as buyer's bargain, politely with merciless weather. A ribbon stall fights the coal reek with colour alone, and nearly wins. A lace seller tucks her stock under shawl, between customers like a mother protecting bright, foolish children. You begin to believe in noon. Butchers are winter's realists. Their cleavers keep tempo. Their hooks glitter with a candour that silences romance. You choose the cut that will behave in a slow pot, imagining it surrendering to onions beside a willing potato. Biting frosts add urgency to every choice. You buy marrow bones because broth is heat that can't run away. The stall's sawdust smells like practical decisions you'll be proud of later. A market's alleyways are thesis and footnote. Main aisles shout commerce. The backs mutter repair. A wheel fixed, a strap stitched, a kettle hammered flatter so it can sing again. Here the relentless damp negotiates with tin and thread, and you learn the dignity of the fix. Hinker sells you a story with the solder. Hold this angle, treat it kindly, it will hold you back. You nod, because metal and people obey the same verbs in winter. Policemen pace like punctuation, tapping truncheons that double as icicle detectors. They watch for pickpockets and sudden fogs, for horses that lose their argument with frost, for tempers that mistake cold for insult. Their breath hangs like brief reports filed with the air. You respect the quiet choreography. A tilt of the chin to a cabman, a palm spread to slow a spooked barrow, a scarf offered to a child who can't stop chattering her teeth into Morse. Money changes temperature with your mood. Cold coins bite, warm coins bless. You budget in loops, coal to cook soup that powers work that buys coal, and still set aside a halfpenny for the singer whose voice remembers July. Everyday winter hardships push generosity into odd shapes. A shared stool, a held place in line, the last hot pie bought to be halved with the slowest walker on your street. The market teaches math with mercy in the margins. When snow arrives, the whole bazaar grows skates. Soot-stained snow tries to slip under boots and barrows alike. Sandboys sell grit as if it were gold, which today it is. Runners strap to cartwheels, shoulders lean into slopes. Jokes get shorter and funnier because breath is a scarce coin. You help right a tumble and discover your own balance coming back like a friend you'd forgotten to invite. By late morning, the sun remembers it's hired. Shadows soften, the bone-deep chill loosens one notch. Stalls glow with the smugness of survival. You carry home oranges, onions, gossip, and a courage that tastes faintly of pepper. Lamplight halos are off-duty. Your pockets jingle like a small orchestra that will fund lunch. Somewhere a church clock clears its throat and calls you to the next scene of the day. Letters, errands, and the bureaucracies that try to count need without miscounting people. Before you turn away, you look back at the market and see the city's winter thesis in one frame. Heat sold by mouthfuls, hope sold by jokes, and 100 hands deciding to be kinder than the temperature. Pocket that image. It will pay your afternoon in steadiness when offices grow mean. Stairs grow treacherous, and the sky rehearses new ways to argue. And there's a different market waiting after dusk, too, one with paper programs and borrowed light, that we'll step into once the kettles have had their say. The bureaucracy of winter begins with an envelope. You join the queue at the General Post Office, boots ticking the stone like a fussy clock, and feel the urban chill sneak under the doors anyway, because authority doesn't intimidate weather. Counters bloom with inkstands. Clerks work in mufflers, stamping the city into sense one thump at a time. Steam ghosts from coats, and the wet wool smell argues with gum arabic and fresh newsprint. Victorian winter life reduces romance to logistics. If your words are to cross town today, they must first earn a postmark. Coaches once ran on bravado. Now iron rails do the sprinting, but biting frosts still veto timer tables with a wink. You listen to a clerk recite delays like weather psalms, frozen points at Clapham, drifts near Didcot, fog that persuades lamps to lie. London cold season turns a letter into a stubborn traveller, and you pay the extra penny for speed, knowing speed has bad boots in January. Still you send it, because hope is a professional and keeps office hours. Telegraph offices hum like bayhivs that studied manners. Behind the counter, needles quiver, clerks tap out lives in dashes that won't keep your fingers warm, but might save your purse. A man in a greatcoat dictates condolences as if speaking to a priest. A woman in ink-spattered cuffs fires off a purchase order that will outrun snow. If snow consents. Everyday winter hardships live here too. Breath frosting on panes, chapped hands wrapped around pencils. The tea kettle hiss in a back room where even news needs a sip. Printers wrestle the morning into existence with metal and muscle. The press is raw, iron lungs that exhale headlines, and ink tattoos fingertips with certainty. Coal reek threads through the warm machinery. Windows sweat. Proofs hang like laundry with opinions. You watch compositors set tiny winters of type. Mercury falls. Fatal misadventure on the Thames. Soup kitchen opens new ward. In brutal cold, information is a blanket you pass along a bench, still hot from the story. Newsboys turn that blanket into weather. They skate the slick streets on soft boots, shouting, "Latest," until the air believes them. Paper warms a chest for 5 minutes if you hold it right. Words warm a city for longer when they're honest. You buy two, one to read, one to give, and the boy salutes with mittened fingers gone shiny at the tips. He's a barometer with freckles, and today he predicts grit and goodwill. Paperwork breeds in winter as if drawn to the sound of coughs. You present yourself at a parish office to certify a birth, explain a death, or keep a marriage legal against January's habit of losing documents in damp drawers. Clerks are compassionate in the way fires are, steady when tended. Names go down correctly, because they might be needed by a doctor, a magistrate, or distant aunt with money and manners. Bone-deep chill respects a ledger. It knows paper can outlive a season. Police courts assemble the city's cold mistakes before lunch. The bench hears cases of cracked windows, slippery tempers, and men who mistook warm gin for good judgment. Witnesses steam gently. Constables narrate with a dryness that would discipline a blizzard. Magistrates are part meteorologist, part parent, measuring punishment in days instead of degrees. When fines are converted to shillings for coal, you watch justice thaw into mercy, almost against its will. Charity boards convene like orchestras with ledgers for violins. Minutes record miracles. 20 tons subscribed, 50 blankets dispersed, tickets for fuel printed while the ink complains. Ladies' committees arrive with lists in perfect copperplate and cheeks weathered by visiting rooms where relentless damp keeps house. Men who never cry anywhere else blink at balance sheets that add up to fewer funerals. London's cold season teaches mathematics with a trembling bottom line and a happy margin note. Identity itself gets winter stamped. You apply for a work ticket, a factory pass, a lodging token, and every document smells faintly of starch and coal dust. A clerk examines your scarf with sympathy and your references without it, then writes your name as if engraving it deeper might warm you. Bureaucracy is tedious because it tries to be fair. Winter is cruel because it doesn't. You leave with papers in your pocket and a measurable future in your hand. Reading rooms convert ink into heat for the price of silence. You thought by rules. Hats off, voices low, pages turned as if they were sleeping cats. Gaslight glows like reason. The librarian pours warmth in footnotes. Here the bleak midwinter loses 3 degrees to geography. Maps of the empire, timetables, sermons, penny dreadfuls that pretend your pulse can be coached back to July. The room believes in you. That's almost as good as coal. Debt offices and pawnbrokers are winter's awkward cousins. You trade a watch for rent and tell yourself time can wait. You redeem a shawl because the wind cannot. Clerks tally sorrow without commentary. The bell on the door barks at despair and sends it to stand in line. Mercy appears in odd corners. A reduced interest. An extra day. A smile that doesn't cost you pride. Everyday winter hardships are not crimes. The paperwork agrees quietly. By early afternoon, the city has been notarized into continuing. Letters dispatched. Tickets granted. Fines is adjusted. Blankets logged. You step back into a light that remembers it can be kind and tuck your papers close where your ribs can read them. The lamplight halos are off duty. The clatter on cobbles returns to its grind, less cruel for having been counted. Next comes the part of day when children pour from schools, shops try to look brave, and the sky rehearses whether to snow or merely threaten, where small rituals keep a fragile warmth intact until the kettles take over again. You can tell how the morning's gone by the sound outside the school gates. Not chatter, but boot squeak on soot-stained snow, and the clatter on cobbles where hoops wobble like tired planets. Victorian winter, life presses little shoulders forward, and caps sit low as if the urban chill had earned promotion. Inside, the stove sulks like an underpaid beetle. Breath blooms into small clouds over slates, scratched with sums that look like icicles. The schoolmistress raps the desk more to keep her own fingers awake than to correct anyone. You hang your coat on a peg that pinches back, and the wet wool smell of 30 children makes the room feel like a laundry with opinions. Writing becomes a winter sport. Ink turns moody. Nibs snap with the brittle dignity of January, and chilblained fingers negotiate the loop of a G, as if it were a dangerous corner. Tea kettle hiss from the teacher's corner is both metronome and miracle, and every child in the front row learns to read by steam. Everyday winter hardships teach neatness the hard way. Spill once and the blot freezes into a fossil before you can dab it. A boy breathes on his slate to fog it, then draws a sun with his sleeve, because hope is quicker than math at 10 o'clock. Discipline bends to the thermometer. You march in place between lessons, slap hands against sleeves, and recite tables like spells that might summon a warmer room. The schoolmaster, who scoffs at softness in June, quietly lets gloves stay on during recitation in the bleak midwinter. Biting frosts make philosophers of teachers. Better a slow lesson and an unfrozen ear, he says, pretending not to see the girl with stockings darned into a map of bravery. London cold season rewrites rules with a blunt pencil and a generous eraser. Ragged schools fight the brutal cold with strategy. A basin steams for faces. Porridge arrives disguised as arithmetic. 1 ladle plus 1 ladle equals your manage, and benches rotate so no spine argues with the draft for too long. You learn that survival in the smog is logistics with manners. A warm brick under the reading desk, a shawl kept for children who come late. A candle moved nearer the map so Africa stops pretending to be. Mercy works best when it looks like tidiness. Playtime is climate engineering. Skipping ropes become radiators on a string. Leapfrog converts calories into laughter. Snowball fights are brief, strategic, and prosecuted under the strictest rules of honor. No ice, no faces, no teachers, unless invited. The yard's crunch of frost under boots is a drum that keeps everyone moving, and the lamplight halos just beyond the wall remind you dusk. We'll arrive early to demand receipts. Children are weatherproofed by motion. Stop, and the bone-deep chill gets ideas. Clothes tell longer stories than books. Mittens knit by a sister double as bargaining chips. A scarf from the charity box earns its place like a scholarship. Boots lined with newspaper graduate from clever to essential by week's end. The coal reek from the alley stove perfumes every garment until the classroom smells like a factory that believes in poetry. Chapped hands learn the alphabet of tallow at night and return ready to grip chalk with a civil handshake. In harsh winters of the 19th century, wardrobe is curriculum. Illness audits attendance without mercy. Coughs sit in empty chairs. A slate waits for a boy whose mother promised tomorrow with a look that meant pray. The mistress sends home onion syrup recipes tucked into copybooks and writes to a parish visitor who can conjure broth faster than hope. You see everyday winter hardships in the arithmetic of absences. Fewer sums, more worry, and a kettle on standby like a nurse who knows all the lullabies. They would have met him to always say out of the culture is to provided. And I'm not on the teak, and my eyes is catalog to learn on. The room understands silence the way a church understands echoes. Some schools run soup clubs that turn noon into salvation. The pot arrives like a brass moon, steaming carefully, and the line advances with a dignity that would shame a parliament. You hold a tin mug until it warms your sternum into having opinions again, and the first spoonful convinces your shoulders they're still attached. Second helpings for those who walk farthest, the teacher says, and children become cartographers with honest feet. In a bitter season, lunch is diplomacy between hunger and pride. Lessons lean toward the practical when the mercury sulks. Geography becomes how to read the river's temper. History becomes what to do when ice lies. And literature is a poem about kettles that whistle hope on bad nights. You practice sums that convert wages into coal and coal into hours of warmth. The master swears you'll not be fooled by a landlord or a storm if he can help it. Education in the London cold season is not abstract. It's a coat you wear for years. There is theatre too, because children demand a stage. Christmas pieces rehearse in rooms where breath is fog and halos are gaslight, and someone's paper crown catches a spark that's pinched out with a speed worthy of saints. Songs sound like July sung through scarves, and the smallest child remembers every line because she's standing nearest the stove. The audience, mothers, brothers, neighbours, clap inside their mufflers and pay with buttons of applause. Warmth can be a chorus line when coal is shy. Dismissal is logistics disguised as care. Teachers pair the smallest with the steadiest, assign routes by the wind's mood, and send notes ahead to soup kitchens that keep the road merciful. You leave in a wedge that breaks the gusts, skirts tucked, hats down, books under coats where hearts can read them. Lamplight halos find you at corners and escort you as far as the market, where oranges argue for colour against the grey. The city pretends not to smile. It fails. And when you reach home, ink-stained and red-nosed, the schoolroom follows. A sum recited to the kettle. A poem repeated to the cat. A map traced in crumbs on the table. Victorian winter, life measures progress by who makes it to supper and who reads a page with warm fingers. You close your copybook, thaw your ears by the grate, and listen as the day leans toward evening. The next scenes belong to the streets again. Shop windows, early dusk, and the tricks merchants use to sell courage by candlelight. Dusk clocks in early, smug as a manager who loves rules, and the streets pull on their evening face. Gas jets pop alive one by one, until lamplight halos stitch a wavering spine down the high street. You feel the urban chill prowling under awnings, poking ankles that thought they were done for the day. Victorian winter life becomes a marketplace of light, every window a small furnace that burns attention into warmth. A violinist saws at something hopeful. His case earns coins plus 2 buttons and a smile with chapped edges. You drift toward the brightest panes the way cold fingers drift toward mugs. Shopkeepers are winter stagehands. Watch how they choreograph glow and color. Oranges piled like portable suns. Ribbons that gossip in the draft. Tin toys ticking with a clockwork heartbeat you can almost hear through the glass. The London cold season turns display into survival. No one lingers long outside unless a window promises July. A draper makes a mountain of flannel and pins a card that reads, "Courage per yard." It's a joke and a business plan. You laugh, then buy a remnant because jokes that warm wrists earn their keep. Inside, you cross the border from grey to sepia. The bell tings, air smells of sizing, tea and wet wool admitting defeat. Clerks move like quiet metronomes, rap, tie, nod, keeping transactions at a tempo that discourages shivers. Everyday winter hardships lurk in small details. Ink that sulks in the inkwell, a cash drawer that sticks when the counter ices, a door that argues with its latch until a boy brings sand for the sill. The mistress of the shop lays your scarf on the stove rail for one civilized minute. Consider it therapy with receipts. Department stores, still proud of the name, sell weather as an experience. One floor pretends it is spring, the next tolerates frost in tasteful doses. You test gloves by the piano because the pianist is paid to convince your hands they deserve melody. The coal reek from the street stays politely at the door, swapped for a perfume that hints at holidays you cannot afford, but will happily visit on credit for the length of a song. This is Victorian winter life at its most theatrical, a rehearsal for comfort that lets you bow as if you belong. Street traders work the hinge between inside and out. A chestnut brazier turns coins into heat with pleasing honesty. Coffee stalls spit steam that folds bodies into temporary congregations. "Arts buds," someone cries, and the clatter on cobbles replies as boots change lanes toward salvation. The bone-deep chill negotiates. You counter with a baked potato that fits your palm like a plan, breathing as you bite, because joy this hot will punish haste. Every mouthful rewrites the weather report from merciless to manageable. Haberdashers and ironmongers specialize in winter's paperwork. Hooks, shawl pins, draft stoppers, rubber rings for leaky kettles. Small items that keep the bitter season from becoming litigation. You learn the satisfaction of buying the right hinge. Doors close, rooms behave, arguments with the wind end on speaking terms. A good brush for boots means less treachery from soot-stained snow on tomorrow's steps. It's not glamorous, but surviving the smog rarely is. Competence, priced per piece, feels like a luxury you can finally afford. Lighting itself becomes merchandise. Chandlers display candles like chessmen. Tallow for realists, beeswax for weddings, storm lamps for the religious and the sensible. Clark demonstrates a reflector sconce that doubles a flame's authority and halves your squinting. You nod as if he solved philosophy. When he packages your purchase, the paper warms under his palm for a second, and you feel oddly seen. In the bleak midwinter, being witnessed counts as heat. Pawnbrokers glow a different color, golden but cool. Inside, time hangs on hooks, watches, shawls, violins that sleep with their chin scars showing. You redeem a coat because a forecast in your bones says, unforgiving nights, for at least a week. The broker, who never smiles at interest but occasionally at stubbornness, wraps it carefully and tells you to oil the buttons so they don't freeze insolent. There's kindness under the arithmetic, thin but real, like sun behind a fog bank. Grocers fight the season with brightness and spice. Cinnamon ambushes your nose. Cloves mug melancholy near the door. Oranges challenge the sky to admit they're superior. You select by sound as much as sight. Apples with the right thud. Onions that don't whimper. Bread that answers a tap with confidence. The tea kettle hiss will turn these into a treaty with the evening. Soup, toast, something sweet if the coins consent. You know exactly how far a half-pound of sugar can warm a room when stirred into a story. Policemen and watchmen patrol. The economy of dusk. They shepherd foot traffic when the pavement glazes and remind shopkeepers to snuff lamps before shutters bite. Obviously, A constable salutes a lamplighter, whose ladder has learned to flirt with gravity. The lamplighter salutes back with a grin that admits every rung is a decision. You learn routes that keep you under honest light, where pickpockets hate to haggle and horses see their own breath before they step. Navigation is a craft. You're getting good at it. Then there are the charity bazaars, rooms borrowed from churches, tables borrowed from neighbours, goodwill borrowed from tomorrow. Knit caps and second-hand books change hands, while choristers warble at the edge of tune. The urban chill dares the window panes to fog. The tea urn replies with a sermon you can drink. You buy a pair of mitts with a crooked thumb and feel warmer than a new pair would allow, because crooked thumbs tell better stories. Winter money likes to be spent where it can overhear gratitude. Closing time arrives like a polite eviction. Shutters rattle down, lamps sigh into darkness, and your parcels thump against your ribs with the honest weight of solutions. Outside, the wind tallies who learn today's lessons. Walk on sanded stretches, hold the rail near the bridge, keep your pockets where your elbows believe in them. The London cold season shows its teeth again. But you're carrying ounces, warm scarf, full paper bag, a plan that smells faintly of citrus and starch. And just beyond the last bright doorway, the night watch picks up the narrative, with boots, bells, and the quiet courage of people paid to argue with the dark. When shops go dark, the city doesn't sleep. It changes uniforms. You step onto a street that has taken off its daytime manners and put on a face of angles. Alleys with opinions, doorways that practice secrets, lamplight halos, floating like faint crowns over wet stone. Victorian winter life after midnight is both quieter and sharper. The urban chill grows teeth, and the wind, slee old usher, guides you toward the safe side of the road without asking. You keep your pace steady, your breath measured, your ears doing more work than your eyes. Link buoys are the first line of navigation, little comets with tar torches that scold the fog into behaving. Ami buys you a river of light that moves at your speed, and the boy knows where soot-stained snow goes treacherous, where the paving tips into mischief, where a step is missing because yesterday forgot to finish it. He's part guide, part rumour shredder. Not that alley, broken lamp, bad drainage, worse temper. In the London cold season, knowledge is heat. You rent it where you can. Constables, peelers in blue, are punctuation marks keeping the sentence of night from running on. Their truncheon taps are metronomes, their lanterns small moons that arrest panic before it multiplies. You'll see them shepherd a drunk away from the edge of a bridge with a tenderness that would surprise daylight, then straighten into official geometry when a door bursts open and a quarrel tries for weather. Everyday winter hardships make cops practical. Sand on the steps first, sermon later. Fire is the night's favourite plot twist, so everyone learns the cues. Clatter of clappers, a bell that rings a street's worth of fear, a cry of "Ho! Fire!" That turns sleep into footsteps. You watch the parish engine arrive, red paint, brass pride, men pumping with a rhythm that insults the brutal cold. Buckets pass hand to hand as if the house were family. Steam blooms from wet wool. The coal reek yields to a smoke with opinions. In the bleak midwinter you learn the liturgy of safety by heart. Damper, sash, blankets, children, then bread for the pumpers when the hiss dies down. Lodging houses glow, grouchy but warm. Their keepers expert in sorting frost-bitten fingers from pickpocketed stories. You pay for a bed like you pay for a ferry, by distance from despair. Rules are strict because rules keep bodies breathing. Boots here, brazier there, no candles near the straw. Talk until you're human again, then sleep. The bone-deep chill respects order. A room full of strangers will fold itself into quiet, like a choir after the last hymn, each grateful for one hot brick passed without argument. Cabmen read streets. The way sailors read stars. Horses wear blankets like medals, hooves find grip by instinct and sand. You bargain in warmth, not distance. Shilling to Bishopsgate extra if you keep the wind on your side. He nods because the urban chill tips fares the way a careless gentleman tips hats. Fog makes even familiar corners look like strangers. A good driver stitches them back into the map and leaves you at a door where the step has been salted by someone who loves mourning. Night shelters and coffee stalls are the city's pulse points. A copper buys a cup that tastes like forgiveness and chicory. A heel of bread becomes logic. You gather at barrels that burn without drama, share news in low voices. Who slipped on the river stairs? Which soup kitchen will open early? Whether the constable with the limp has been posted to your block again. Survival in the smog at 1 a.m. is a collective sport. You play for a team called Tomorrow. Theft doesn't hibernate, but winter edits its methods. Cut purses prefer crowded doorways where bodies huddle for heat. Cracksmen schedule jobs when the wind howls enough to erase the sound of a hinge. You answer with simple physics. Keep coins where elbows approve, walk where light has made friends, let your link boy run a yard ahead so shadows must introduce themselves. If trouble insists, you borrow the street's voice. Hoy travels well in cold and windows open faster when the air already hurts. Ambulances, black carts with anxious hearts, work harder in merciless weather. A fall on ice, a lung that surrenders, a baby impatient for the kettle to boil. Night collects emergencies the way fog collects on glass. Hospital orderlies move with the competence of people who have lost arguments and learn not to waste minutes. Inside the casualty ward, breath makes its own weather above iron beds. You sign your name in a ledger that smells of ink and carbolic and hope. At river stairs, watchmen practice prophecy. They judge tide by toe, fog by taste, frost by the sound a rope makes when it lies. Pole laid across the top step becomes law. Don't. They'd rather be mocked by a sober boy than carry a silent body to the watchhouse. Bells drift from unseen boats. Somewhere a gull laughs like a gossip who has noticed your hat. You take the long way round because the Thames is a mood even in daylight and a habit of drowning. After dark, street sweepers are unsung saints with shovels for hallows. They turn ice into slush, slush into puddles, puddles into a memory you'll step over at dawn. Sandboys scatter grit as if they were seeding spring in advance. They save more bones than any surgeon and are thanked by no one but the occasional copper and your ankles. In harsh winters of the 19th century, sainthood is measured in avoided falls. Watch the choreography of shutters and bolts. Householders lay down bars with the tenderness of parents tucking in children. Cats are negotiated with and ultimately bribed. Windows keep a finger's width of honesty so flames don't lose their tempers. You'll hear wicks pinched into size, see silhouettes do the math of blankets to bodies, and smell a last curl of tallow surrender to the dark. The city's heartbeat slows, not from fear, but from prudence. And yet, amid all this caution, there are small extravagances. A violinist under a dripping awning plays a waltz for two shivering lovers who dance exactly 3 steps, then flee. A baker, up for the pre-dawn, slides a bun into the hand of a constable who has been a bridge for 4 hours. A lamplighter, making his last round, lingers under a window where someone coughs and says softly, "Nearly morning now." You pocket these bright coins against the next hour of wind. When you finally reach your own door, the key feels like a medal. Inside, the kettle rehearses the only aria winter never heckles. The room exhales the day's temper. You bank the coals with the competence of a captain mooring her ship. Victorian winter life after midnight is a contract. The city will keep watch if you keep wisdom. Sleep comes like an audit you pass, and the night, never kind, sometimes fair, signs off with a frost that looks tender until your toes remind you otherwise at dawn. Sunday begins like a held breath. After the racket of Saturday markets and after midnight patrols, the street wakes slow, as if the city has finally found the snooze button. Frost crusts the area railings and the crunch of frost under your boots sounds almost respectful. Victorian winter life shifts from scramble to Sabbath, from hurry to hush, and the urban chill, while still bossy, seems willing to negotiate. Kettles clear their throats, shutters open one eye. Lamplight halos fade to pale daylight that forgives more than it illuminates. You wrap your scarf twice anyway. Mercy doesn't stop the bone-deep chill from filing its morning report. Church bells take attendance for the neighborhood. Families step out in their best, shawls brushed, boots freshly blacked, and the wet wool smell rises in friendly clouds as pews swallow people by rows. Inside, a single stove radiates ambition more than heat, but bodies turn drafts into tolerable rumors. Chapped hands warm on prayer books, breath fogs toward the rafters, and hymn tunes climb into the nave like birds trying winter on for sighs. This is London cold season tempered by ritual, where the tea kettle hiss at home will finish whatever the sermon starts. The preacher knows his congregation's weather as well as their sins. Texts lean practical. Widows, strangers, the hungry, the cold, chapter and verse, with coal tickets folded inside the amen. Notices announce parish soup hours, coal club dividends, a blanket drive, and warnings about river stairs that lie when they look solid. Everyday winter hardships get named out loud, and naming them is halfway to helping. You leave with a tract in one glove and a plan in the other, and both feel warmer than the stove ever managed. Between services, charity moves at walking speed. You and 3 neighbors carry broth to a garret where the relentless damp argues with an old man's lungs. Someone leaves an orange by the bed as if it were a small son. In tenements, infants are baptized quickly because merciless weather doesn't wait for spring. In hospitals, visitors bring books that smell faintly of coal reek and hope. The Sabbath softens the city's edges, not by miracle, but by errands done with gentler faces. By noon, the street outside the bakehouse smells like optimism. Households line up with trays and tins, beef for the lucky, a shepherd's pie for the determined, potatoes for nearly everyone. Oven heat pours into the lane, and soot-stained snow recedes sheepishly from the threshold. The baker, high priest of appetite, slides in tin after tin, while a rag boy fans the door with a peel. You carry the Sunday roast home like a treaty signed by Gravy, and the whole staircase wants to move in with you. Dinner is a negotiation, with memory as much as hunger. You plate the crispest potato for the child who's fought the brutal cold with the bravest mittens. You save the last spoon of drippings for tomorrow's bread. Tea follows, poured like counsel, and the room tilts toward storytelling. Lamplight turns faces into warmer strangers you recognize as family. The cat schedules laps according to steam. For an hour, the bleak midwinter becomes seasoning rather than substance. After plates, there's the holy office of mending. Socks get darned, elbows patched, buttons persuaded back to duty. Boots, loosened by the thaw of gravy and gossip, accept blacking without complaint. Bedding airs at the window, a bright boast against the grey. The tea kettle hiss narrates the process while letters are answered in a hand steadier than yesterday's. Ink flows better on Sundays, perhaps because the house isn't shivering quite so hard. Children earn recess in approved amounts. If the pond is roped, they slide on the scraped patch under grown eyes. If the park paths are salted, hoops wobble along like small planets learning their orbits again. A chestnut seller does brisk trade with pennies that bought psalms an hour ago. Ears go red, noses teeter on heroic, and everyone returns with the wet wool smell that says, "We were winter's guests and behaved." Respectability sets the evening program. Some families walk out to look at shop windows reborn as mirrors. Some read the week's paper aloud until headlines sound less like threats and more like punctuation. Pubs keep quieter hours. Hymn sings in back rooms stretch warmth without waking scandal. You slip a penny to a link boy who's off duty today, and delighted by it. Even the constable's lantern swings slower, as if Sunday persuades the night to mind its manners. Sabbath has its griefs too, and the bells tell those truths. Funerals move with measured mercy, carriages creaking over stones dusted white. Wreaths brighten the soot like defiance with ribbons. You tip your hat because respect costs less than coal and warms longer. In a city where unforgiving nights always take their tax, a decent farewell is both protest and balm. The procession passes, and the street exhales into ordinary again. Before dark, you practice preventative salvation. Kindling stacked, damper tested, scuttle filled, drafts bullied with stitched snakes and folded newspapers. a spare pot of broth tucked at the back of the stove for a neighbor who will happen to pass after Compline. The bone-deep chill respects a prepared house. It may still knock, but it doesn't kick the door in as often. You set out Monday's boots where morning light will find them, and feel tomorrow soften by 1 degree. Night folds the day in careful thirds. A psalm at low volume, a story edited for courage, a last look at the banked coals glowing like small promises. The window keeps its finger width of honesty, so the flame doesn't grow sullen. The room keeps its compact with sleep. Victorian winter life never truly relents, but on Sundays it agrees to speak softly. You let your eyes close on that rare treaty, storing the warmth for the work week, because the whistles, the markets, and the river will all ask for it back at dawn. You can smell December before you see it. Orange peel, damp wool, a treasonable amount of nutmeg fighting the coal reek to a draw. Windows sprout holly like small green rebellions against the London cold season. Door knockers wear ivy, as if winter could be wooed into better manners. Victorian winter life doesn't pause for festivity. It armors it. You cinch your scarf, nod to the lamplight, halos that now glow like halos on purpose, and let the street teach you the art of warming a neighborhood with ceremony and sugar. Preparation begins in kitchens that look like steam engines hired to do kindness. A plum pudding, really a cannonball of hope, boils for hours in a cloth that smells faintly of last year's laughter. You stir clockwise with a wish because that's the rule, and everyone takes a turn so the wish learns your whole address. Oranges studded with cloves hang in the window like tiny suns on assignment. The tea kettle hiss sings under everything, a metronome for cinnamon and patience. Everyday winter hardships retreat 2 spoonfuls at a time. Greens come indoors as if the hedgerows were visiting ambassadors. Holly prickles the fingers into better language. Ivy loops over mantles as if it were practicing handwriting. A sprig over the door legalizes kisses you were planning anyway, and even the bone-deep chill seems to enjoy the joke. You tuck berries away from toddler hands and candle flames because tenderness counts as safety too. By evening, the room has learned to look like July without lying about the temperature. Carols sound different when breath makes weather. Voices rise in scarves and return as small clouds that clap between verses. The urban chill edits pitch but can't touch harmony, and street corners become altars where neighbors put coins in hats and honesty in the chords. God rest you does more than ask. It volunteers. The last note hangs, frost catches it, and a chestnut brazier agrees to keep it warm until morning. Churches rehearse hospitality with solemn focus. Candles line aisles like patient constellations, and a stove the size of a modest rhinoceros attempts to argue with knave-sized cold. You share pew rugs, hymnals, and the occasional polite elbow, and realize Victorian winter life has trained everyone for synchronized generosity. The minister preaches about light in darkness and slips coal tickets into the benediction without making a fuss. The door back into the night feels less rude. Christmas Day dinner turns hunger into choreography. Potatoes parade to the table, already applauding themselves. Goose crackles like an honest laugh. Gravy negotiates peace between everything and everything else. Oranges roll between plates like bright punctuation that refuses to accept grey as a lifestyle. You pour tea into the hands that carved, washed, fetched, and kept the fire from sulking. In merciless weather, gratitude is a stew served hot and often. There's theatre in the afternoon, charades that risk dignity and win. Mummers in the street confusing plot with enthusiasm, a paper crown that insists on sliding down someone's nose and refuses to apologize. Children construct forts out of rug fringes. Elders fall asleep with that particular Victorian courage that says, "Wake me for pudding or fire." The coal reek takes a holiday behind cloves and citrus. Even the window learns to fog in decorative patterns. Boxing Day is winter's diplomacy with work. You pack envelopes for the postman and the dustman, a nod to the hands that move the city while you argue with draft snakes and ledgers. Tradesmen arrive shy as cats, hats in hands, and leave with coins, and a biscuit that insists on being shared before the doorway lets them off the premises. Lamplight halos look almost proud of this civility. Paying thanks warms both sides of the threshold more efficiently than most fires. Not everyone celebrates indoors. Theatres test pond edges under a constable's raised eyebrow. Boys drag sledges that squeal like happy hinges. Someone claims the slope behind the church and transforms it into a curriculum titled Gravity, a Practical Study. You hold gloves to your face and inhale wool until the urge to behave passes. Biting frosts write laughter into cheeks. The market sells more ribbons than logic, because girls deserve flying colours even at 10 below sensible. Wassail feels like a recipe for rebellion and medicine disguised as company. A bowl arrives steaming with apples that have decided to be benevolent. Nutmeg and ale negotiate a truce capable of moving a choir. Cups circulate. Stories follow. Suspicion takes the night off. The urban chill waits in the alley and mutters about calendars. Indoors someone toasts absent friends and present debts in the same breath, and neither feels heavier for it. Twelfth Night has its own practical magic. A cake hides a bean and a pea. Kings and queens are crowned by lottery, and the household obeys silly edicts that convert fatigue into laughter without waking scandal. Candles play nearer to mischief. So eyes play nearer to candles. The tea kettle hiss acts as chaperone. You pack away the greenery with a tenderness that admits the grey will be louder tomorrow. Then tuck one clove orange into a drawer, because hope needs a month to finish. Then the long thaw teases and recants. Gutters loosen their grip. Soot-stained snow rehearses its exit speeches. Streets convert heroically back into mud. Hopeful fools leave the house in fewer layers and come home telling cautionary tales. Winter is not done. It is merely distracted. You recount coal, rehang shawls, and promise yourself one more week of oranges if the greengrocer is feeling merciful. The season smiles thinly and sharpens its pencils. You know the look, and you know how to answer it. With ritual, with soup, and with the small stubborn warmth you've been saving for the last stretch. You notice it first in sound. The crunch of frost retires, replaced by a soft squelch that makes the clatter on cobbles sound sheepish. Downspouts relearn conversation, and gutters resume their gossip with leaves that outlived a sermon. The urban chill still sends postcards, but it's moved out. Victorian winter life loosens its grip one drip at a time. You catch yourself untying a scarf before the corner and realize your breath is no longer a headline. Sunlight arrives in thin, honest sheets that don't brag. They simply work. Coal reek thins to a rumor, like a neighbor who's finally taken a holiday. Window sashes rise an inch, then two. The room inhales and decides it remembers being a room, not a campaign. The tea kettle hisses still the house heartbeat, but now it sings leisure instead of triage. Wet wool smell retreats to the hallway as coats sulk on pegs, drying from habit rather than necessity. You bank the fire smaller and feel extravagant, which is a new winter luxury called marchect. Boots confess their winter sins, salt scars, cracked seams, heels that danced with ice and lost. So you sit them down for a talk with brush, blacking, and patience. Leather drinks, sighs, forgives. Draft snakes retire to summer billets, honored veterans of bitter season campaigns. You roll them with the pomp carpet beaters reserved for rugs dragged to the yard. Thwack! There goes February. Thwack! There goes the cough that tried for tenancy. Even the lamplight halos look relieved, shrinking from nightly duty to occasional drama. Markets change colour first. Oranges stop pretending to be suns and become merely delicious. Greens creep back, shy but stubborn. Costas swap jokes about chilblains for complaints about mud, which is progress by any sensible ledger. You buy onions that smell like plans rather than survival, and a loaf that insists on a picnic even if the bench is damp. The London coal season hasn't resigned, but it's on probation. Your pockets, for once, jingle louder than your teeth. Work takes off its muffler and speaks in complete sentences again. Sweat less in irony, Textile rooms open a window without starting a revolution. Clerks discover ink that flows without coaxing. Everyday winter hardships fade to anecdotes. You tell a kettle that now whistles for pleasure, not permission. You walk farther at lunch because the sun has negotiated a raise. Biting frosts still send the occasional memo. But management is clearly changing. The river loses its temper and regains its face. Fog still practices pro forma, but the Thames sounds less like prophecy and more like business. Watermen grin with both sides of the mouth, stares slick with memory dry into stone again. Flowers appear where grief laid them, and look less like apologies and more like companions. You lean on the rail without it trying to bite your glove, and consider forgiving January. Eventually. Home becomes ambitious. Windows unblinker, blankets go courting the line. Bedding airs until the neighborhood smells like soap with opinions. You find drafts you bullied all season and let them go on parole. Chimneys get an honest sweep and a handshake. Grates receive smaller rations without sulking. The parlor, freed from laundry purgatory, rehearses at being a place for conversation instead of steam. The cat relocates from fire watching to sun worship with scandalous speed. Charity pivots, not away but ahead. Coal tickets give way to shoe money for children who grew out of boots, while the sky was busy being stern. Soup kitchens turn to stew clubs, then to lessons in gardens that promise peas if everyone behaves. Parish visitors trade flannels for needles and thread. Winter's seriousness becomes spring's competence. The ledger of mercy never closes. It just changes columns. Bodies let go of clench. Knuckles stop chapping for sport. Noses step down from heroism. Coughs become footnotes. You walk without cataloguing every warm doorway between here and there. Even grief feels lighter, as if the churchyard thawed the part of sorrow that insisted on staying icy. In the bleak midwinter, you learned to be brave. Now you practice being gentle with the same diligence. Nights forget to be cruel. Stars return looking freshly laundered, and watchmen's lanterns swing for the joy of balance rather than the duty of warning. Pubs open windows a finger's width and rediscover the tone called conversation that doesn't need smoke to sound deep. Street songs climb a note, then another. You still carry caution in your pocket, but it stops shouting and starts humming along. You'll miss some things, and it's all right to say so. The honest camaraderie of hands around mugs, the democracy of chairs dragged cheek by glow, the courage paid nightly in small coins of kindness, these belong to winter, and winter taught you how to spend them. Spring will ask different questions. Can you share when it's easy? Plan when it's pleasant? Remember when it's safe? You nod because the season trained you for exams it never named. One morning you step out and realize the city smells of bread first, then horses, then rain, not coal. The street is still the street, but it's wearing a cleaner sentence. You tighten your laces out of habit, then loosen them because habit needs a holiday too. Victorian winter, life bows without apology and exit stage left. You don't clap. You bank the lesson instead. Warmth is a social art, made daily by hands, kettles, and the stubborn idea that tomorrow deserves tea. Let the city exhale. The clatter on cobbles has faded to a soft memory, lamplight halos dim to amber, and the tea kettle hiss hangs like a thin ribbon of comfort in the air. You've walked a London cold season with steady steps, past coal reek and wet wool smell, past soot-stained snow and biting frosts. And you're still here, warmer for having looked straight at the brutal cold, without blinking. What did winter teach you? That comfort isn't the opposite of hardship. It's a ritual that reshapes it. In harsh winters of the 19th century, survival in the smog wasn't grand or heroic. It was a sequence of small, stubborn choices, a shorter route along warm brick, a cracked window to outfox the relentless damp, a cup held long enough to thaw chapped hands. Those little decisions turned unforgiving nights into livable ones. Maybe that's the quiet thesis of Victorian winter life. The city can be merciless, but meaning is merciful. Markets still opened in bleak midwinter. Letters still crossed town, ink trembling, hearts steady. Even when the crunch of frost announced another bitter season, people kept trading warmth. Bread for a penny, laughter for a minute, stories for a lifetime. Ritual by ritual, the urban chill met its match. Carry that forward. When your own weather turns, look for the baker's doorway, the mental corridor of heat you can step into. Remember how a humble kettle became a bell for hope, how a shawl was less fabric than promise. You can't command the temperature outside, but you can conduct the tempo inside. Master the tempo, and the bone-deep chill becomes a tutor, not a tyrant. And if the records, Mayhew's sketches, Booth's coloured maps, the public ledgers of smoke and sickness eventually fade, the wisdom doesn't. It lives in muscle memory, the way you cup a mug, the way you choose company over cold, the way you notice a room's breath and let your own breathing answer. History is a house. Habit is its fireplace. So tell me, which image will you keep for your next bleak midwinter? The lamplight halos in fog, the first tea kettle hiss at dawn, or the quiet victory of dry socks by the hearth? What's one warmth ritual you'll borrow for your life this week? And which moment surprised you most about London's everyday winter hardships? Share it below. Your story might be someone else's call for the night. If this journey steadied your pulse and widened your curiosity, pass the warmth on. Share this video with a friend who loves history or needs a calm companion for sleep. Then, so we can keep learning together, tap subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now.